I want to start somewhere personal, because before anything else, I'm a parent. And when you're a parent, the world doesn't feel abstract anymore. It feels sharp, loud, permanent. You stop worrying about market cycles or timelines and start worrying about a human being you helped bring into existence. A human being who didn't ask for attention, didn't ask for a spotlight, and definitely didn't ask for the weight that comes with a famous last name. What keeps me up at night isn't criticism aimed at me. I signed up for that. I built Calusas for that. What unsettles me is knowing that a child can step into a digital world where curiosity gets mistaken for intention and innocence gets interpreted as strategy. One video can be replayed, reframed, slowed down, taken out of context, and suddenly it's no longer a moment, it's a verdict. That's a lot for anyone, let alone someone still figuring out who they are. When you're a parent in private, fear comes quietly. When you're a parent in public, fear comes amplified. You realize that the internet doesn't pause to ask, is this fair? It asks, is this clickable? And that changes how you think about protection. You can't just lock the door and turn off the lights. The world is already inside the room. I believe kids should explore, speak, create, and express. But I also know how unforgiving public judgment can be. That tension between wanting them to be brave and wanting them to be safe, that's where my heart lies right now. Because when the world is watching your child, love isn't loud, it's vigilant. There's something people don't fully grasp about attention until they see it land on someone who isn't built for it yet. Adults spend years learning how to filter noise, how to separate signal from outrage, how to stand steady when opinions come flying from every direction. A child doesn't have that armor. They're still learning what their own voice sounds like. And suddenly millions of other voices show up all at once. When a young person is visible, everything accelerates. Praise feels overwhelming. Criticism feels absolute. A single comment can feel like a truth instead of just an opinion. And when that attention is tied to something creative or expressive, like a video, the stakes feel even higher. What might have been a moment of curiosity or play instantly becomes, some people analyze as if it were a manifesto. The pressure isn't just external, it sneaks inside. You start to wonder, did I say the wrong thing? Did I move the wrong way? Should I have stayed quiet? That kind of self-monitoring can shut down curiosity fast. And curiosity is fragile. It's the same force that drives learning, invention, and growth. Once you replace curiosity with fear, you don't get better outcomes, you get smaller ones. I worry about a world where kids learn to perform before they learn to think, where they optimize for approval instead of understanding. Visibility should expand possibility, not shrink it. But that only works if we remember that young minds are not finished products. They're prototypes. They need iteration, not judgment. The real danger isn't attention itself, it's forgetting who it's aimed at. Because when pressure arrives before perspective, growth pays the price. As a parent, there's a constant negotiation happening in your head. On one side, there's the instinct to protect, to step in, shut things down, pull your child back from anything that might hurt them. That instinct is ancient. It's wired deep. But on the other side, there's trust. Trust that they're stronger than we think. Trust that they need room to learn, even if that learning comes with discomfort. The hard part is realizing that protection can sometimes turn into limitation. If you step in too fast, you might keep them safe in the short term, but you also quietly tell them, I don't think you can handle this. And that message sticks. It shapes how they see themselves long after the moment has passed. I don't want my child to grow up believing the world is something to hide from. At the same time, trust doesn't mean absence. It doesn't mean walking away and hoping for the best. Real trust is active. It's staying close. It's listening more than you speak. It's being ready to step in if the weight gets too heavy, but not rushing in just because you're uncomfortable. That balance is difficult, and honestly, I don't think anyone gets it perfect. I've learned that kids don't need us to control their path. They need us to anchor it. They need to know that no matter how loud the world gets, there's one place where they're not judged, analyzed, or reduced to a headline, a place where they're allowed to be unfinished. So I choose to trust even when it scares me. Because confidence doesn't grow from being sheltered, it grows from being supported while standing in the open. One of the things that worries me most about the digital world is how permanent it pretends every moment is. A child does something today, and the internet treats it like a final draft. There's no allowance for growth, no version history, no context update, just a snapshot frozen in time and passed around as if that's the whole story. But kids aren't static, they change fast. What they believe at 12 isn't what they'll believe at 16. What they experiment with today might be something they laugh about later. That's not hypocrisy, that's development. We don't expect children to get everything right the first time they try walking, speaking, or thinking. Yet online, the expectation suddenly becomes perfection. The problem isn't that people remember. Memory can be useful. The problem is when memory turns into a label. When a single moment becomes a shortcut for who someone is supposed to be forever. That kind of compression flattens complexity, and complexity is where humanity actually lives. I think about how many mistakes I made growing up that were never recorded, never uploaded, never dissected by strangers. Those mistakes were teachers. They were necessary. If every misstep had been archived and judged, I'm not sure I would have had the courage to keep going. Children need room to explore without fearing permanent consequences for temporary thoughts. They need a world that understands growth isn't linear and identity isn't fixed. If we deny them that space, we don't get stronger adults, we get quieter ones. So when I look at the digital record, I remind myself of this: a moment can be saved, but a child is still becoming. I spend a lot of time thinking about responsibility. People usually frame it around products, platforms, or progress. And those things matter. But responsibility doesn't stop at what we build. It extends to who our systems affect, especially the youngest ones. Technology amplifies everything. That's its power. But amplification without care can turn into pressure without consent. We talk a lot about shaping the future, but the future isn't just hardware and code, it's people, and children are the most sensitive inputs in any system. They absorb signals fast. They learn what gets rewarded, what gets punished, and what gets ignored. If we build environments where outrage spreads faster than understanding, we shouldn't be surprised when fear becomes the default emotion. I don't believe innovation and protection are opposites. I think they're partners. If we can design machines that land rockets vertically, we can design digital spaces that recognize vulnerability. That doesn't mean censorship or control, it means intention. It means asking, who carries the weight of this? Before we ask, how fast can this spread? As adults, especially those with influence, we set the tone whether we want to or not. Kids watch how we react. They notice whether we pause before judging or rush to condemn. That behavior teaches them what kind of world they're stepping into. And right now, we can do better. Building the future responsibly means remembering that progress isn't measured only by speed or scale, but by how well it protects those still learning how to stand. Because if innovation forgets its youngest observers, it's not advancing, it's skipping ahead without them. At the end of all this, after the noise, the opinions, the speculation, what remains is something very simple. Love doesn't need an audience, it doesn't need validation, it doesn't announce itself with statements or explanations. Most of the time, it stands quietly just out of frame, making sure someone knows they're not alone. I don't need to control every outcome to be present. I don't need to rewrite someone else's words to show care. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay close without interfering, to let someone speak while knowing there's a steady hand nearby if they stumble. That kind of support doesn't trend, but it lasts. I want my child to know that their voice matters, not because people react to it, but because it's theirs. I want them to grow up understanding that expression isn't about applause, and courage isn't about perfection. It's about showing up honestly, even when the world feels louder than it should. There will always be moments when fear whispers that it would be easier to pull back, to disappear, to avoid attention altogether. But growth doesn't happen in hiding. It happens when someone feels safe enough to step forward, knowing they're supported no matter what comes next. So I stand where I've always stood, just behind the camera, just outside the spotlight, paying attention, not to control the story, but to protect the person telling it. Because in the end, guidance isn't about directing every step. It's about being there when the road gets uncertain. And that kind of love doesn't shout, it stays.